Welcome to the Business as Mission podcast, dedicated to those who long to see God glorified in business and the nations reached for Christ. Your host is Mike Bayer, longtime BAM leader and founder of Third Path Initiative, an online education resource for starting and growing BAM businesses around the world.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Business as Mission podcast. I'm Mike Bayer, and I am back with a returning friend, Carrie-Anne Ballantyne from Ottawa, Canada. And just by way of introduction, and then I'll let you introduce yourself. But way back, I'm just looking up this morning in February of 2022, Carrie was our guest, first-time guest there. The episode is well, I can't even see it, but it's a February 28th episode called Oh Canada. And I'm saying that mainly because if you're not sure who Carrie is, you should know who she is. Go back and listen to that podcast. She tells the story of BAM Canada, how they get started, she and Aubrey Tozer, what they're doing. And now, coming up on 2 years later, right?
Yeah, almost 2. Wow.
2 years later, they have done so many things. God has really grown the work. And so, Carrie, now you can introduce yourself and we'll get started. I just want to make sure they knew they could go back and hear the beginning of your story last time we were together.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for having me. Love just jumping into these conversations and even our off-camera chats beforehand, just catching up. It's always good to just catch up again. But yeah, I'm Carrie-Anne. For those of you that don't know me, I'm in Canada. I'm currently living in Ottawa. We just got, at the time of this recording, our first big snow dump. So it's definitely feeling great here. The wintry weather is upon us. But yeah, with BAM Canada, we've had an incredible few years. I can't believe how fast time has flown. At that first recording you just mentioned in February 2022, that was our first birthday. And so now we're approaching 3, which is crazy how much we've, the whirlwind that the 3 years have been. But it's been a fun ride.
You know, one of the things you and I have both seen and we've experienced is it seems like from the time the pioneer BAMers were, for this generation, were first starting to work in the early 90s, and the time the movement began to coalesce around 2000, 2001, with Mott's and some of the others stepping up and really laying a foundation for that. It's grown and grown and grown, but it seems to be this last couple of years, it has just accelerated in exponential ways.
Yeah.
It's like a whirlwind of God moving, and literally around the world, Canada being one of the great examples of where he's at work. So what have the last 2 years been like for you, since we've talked some, but we haven't done a podcast? So catch people up.
Yeah.
Want to hear about, what you and your team are doing now and what you see coming up, because I think 24 is going to be a phenomenal year.
Yeah, agreed. And I love that you mentioned even the pioneers of BAM in the 90s, early 2000s. And just a quick note, so thankful for everyone, if you're listening, that's been you, or if you've benefited from that. The shoulders that we get to stand on is really exciting, and that allows us to be able to propel everything forward. So just really thankful for what that has been, and so thankful for even you've been one of those as well, but so thankful for Matt's and the team. But what has the last 3 years looked like? It's been a wild adventure. Since we chatted last, our priority has kind of shifted, where we were really establishing that online community space, which we still have and is continuing to grow. We've shifted to, as the world's opened up with COVID being a little less invasive into our lives, has shifted into more of we want to catalyze locally and support nationally. That's the language that we use as a team. So our goal across Canada, if you don't know Canadian geography, huge country, very spread out population. So we have all of these pockets all across the country. And so our goal we've been working on it for the past year, and continuing to just take it to new levels, is to see localized communities catalyzed, to be able to learn from one another and grow together and challenge each other and come together in those spaces. And then our role is to kind of support that nationally, to make sure that people are able to get connected into what's happening globally or what's happening in other communities, or be challenged and create resources and all that fun stuff. But that's kind of what our focus has been over the last couple of years, and looking to continue into that in the future.
Carrie-Anne, unpack a little bit the local catalyst. I'm kind of used to thinking about this as a national thing. BAM Canada is, the BAM Canada Conference or the BAM Vancouver Conference, which is a related organization, related focus. But when you say local, what does that look like? And by the way,
Yeah.
I'm intrigued with that and excited about that because I do believe, even though BAM is a global movement, it's limbed out locally. So what does that look like?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and even from a perspective of BAM Global, Mats and Aubrey and I actually were just chatting about this, but from a global standpoint, when that started, it wasn't wanting to only stay as a global movement, it's wanting to also be something that's national or regional, because then there's different expressions of what that can look like. Global will always exist because you need something to bring everyone together. We see it in a similar way within our nation of we want to be able to exist to support Canadians, whether they're at home, abroad, whatever that looks like. But we also want that to be able to be something that's localized and for people to also just a very practical way for people to hear about it. Because if someone talks about it in their local church or their local community, they have a higher chance of hearing about it. So what that looks like, we've been really inspired by, you mentioned BAM Vancouver. We've been really inspired by what Mike Davies and his team have done out there, out in Vancouver, west coast of Canada, for anyone that doesn't know. They're doing incredible things. They predate BAM Canada even, which is fun. So they've actually been doing what they're doing for, I think it's about 8 or 9 years. And they've been doing an incredible job of gathering people. Their last conference just in 8 months ago or so, they had about 200 business people that were gathered together just in their local city. So we've been really inspired by that to see, okay, that's happening in Vancouver. How can we come alongside people in other towns? I know there's a group in Collingwood, for example. Honestly, most Canadians probably don't know where that is. So if you don't know where that is, that is A-okay. Yeah, it's like north of Toronto. It's like the one ski hill that Ontario has, so it's a big deal. But it's about an hour north-ish of Toronto. My geography is not fantastic, but ish. And so there's a group there of about a dozen or so business people that have been meeting for, I think, almost a decade now. And they've been going through different books together and challenging each other. But they're kind of asking like, okay, what else could we do? What's next? What else could that look like? So our goal is to kind of discover those groups and pockets, because we just discovered them recently, and find these groups, equip them, resource them in any way that they need, not for it to be a chapter of BAM Canada. That doesn't need to be the moniker, language, or anything like that, but for a way for us to just organically support them, and then connect them into the greater BAM movement in the world, really. So, yeah.
A couple of things as you're talking. One thing that jumps out at me is is you put your finger on something I think is vital to anybody exploring the world of business's mission. Is there's no ownership. There's no organization that controls this. It's not like you become a chapter and you have to be approved it's a beautiful sort of hands-off movement of God. And all I've seen and what you're describing, same thing, is we acknowledge what God is doing in different places and we do our best to support each other officially in the sense that we care about what God is doing in the world through business, but more relationally. I know Mats and I work together very closely from the early days in Central Asia, and I don't belong to anything that he belongs to except the body of Christ. And so what you described is really perfect. So thank you for sharing that. Second thing I would ask you is that if somebody wants to, and it really that clarifies, how do they get in touch with you? Why do they get in touch with you? But what happens if somebody says, hey, we want to, I'll use the word fellowship. We want to fellowship. We want to relate. We want to be a part. We want you to be a part. We all recognize there's something bigger here. How do they go to you? Is that the first step?
Yeah, so we would recommend like jumping into our online community that BAM Canada, if you just go to businessesmission.ca/network, you can then meet people that are also in the same, maybe even in your own backyard and you didn't know it. That's happened a few times and it's fun. But yeah, for sure, send me an email or just even send it to info@bamcanada.net. We'd love to be able to connect you into other people in your community. Or if you don't know any, we'd love to try and help discover some people in your community. What that's looked like even like in the midst of a few things that we're doing right now are there's quite a few people in Alberta that have reached out to us, which is one of our provinces on the west of Canada, that have said, hey, we really want to have something gathering. What does this look like? So honestly, it's probably about a year ago, time's flying. We had our first gathering of just online on Zoom of everyone. If you know someone in Alberta, come, we'll just chat, see what is missing. Because there's actually a couple universities that are Christian in the area that are doing BAM programs. A lot of really great things that are happening in pockets of Alberta, but wanting to kind of have that gathering space. So we've been working on that, putting along in different ways what that can look like. But one thing I'm really excited about that we're actually piloting for the first time in March in BC, which is on the West Coast, is an event called a Missional Business Boot Camp. I don't know if we talked about this before.
We didn't.
Because it was in its budding early stages. But yeah, we have our first pilot date locked in. I'm really excited about it. And what it looks like is it's about a 3-4 hour event. And what it looks like is bringing business people together, kind of like an intro to BAM. What does that mean? What does it look like? And we have this whole process that we've built out of kind of a pyramid, if you can picture that. And the base level is sacred secular divide. Let's unpack that. What does that mean? And then we go to whole life discipleship. Okay, what does that mean? And then we move on from that to, okay, vocational stewardship. What does it mean for us to specifically steward our vocation? And then beyond that, okay, how can I actually steward the business, and kind of builds on this. And so anyway, we're really excited for what that can mean kind of as a kind of like a springboard for what it can look like to bring people together and then launch something in a community, and kind of through that process discover who are the local people that are influential in their community, that they can take this to the next level. Because if we make this a model, we'll be flying all over Canada, full-time job, and I don't think that's really practical or sustainable. So yeah, that's kind of something that we're really excited about right now.
I love that. And I think it reminds me of two things. We were in India recently for a BAM conference in the southern part of the country. And I think we had it was the first of its kind, and we had less than 100 people come. But what was interesting is when they came together in the room, this beautiful little conference center in one of the largest cities, people started realizing I'm not the only one doing this.
Yeah.
They weren't thrilled to come hear the speakers. But when they left, they were actually more thrilled to have met at least one other person that thinks like they think, and they can use the same language and encourage each other. I just kind of heard you say that in different words, is that people are discovering, hey, I didn't even know you were doing this. And so that power of relationship is really tremendous. And then the other thing you said, I'm excited about the idea that, really this boot camp is getting the basics in place. It's so vital because, we see a lot of people want to take their businesses overseas for the kingdom, but they're not doing the kingdom here.
Yeah.
If you don't do it at home, you're not going to do it in Indonesia. You're not going to do it in Kyrgyzstan. So get it right here. And I love that. Where can we learn more about that? Is that on the website yet?
It will be. After our first pilot, we'll then put out some information and like pictures and get a full vibe of what it looks like. But for now, if you're curious, anyone listening and they want to run one in their community, for sure, just send me an email, info@bamcanada.net. Again, we would love to, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time as well. But yeah, we would love to connect and see what that looks like. And one thing that's really cool about it as well for this first one is we're actually partnering with like a local church, and a couple other smaller churches and businesses are kind of coming along. And our goal is that it's not us putting it on and to make it a BAM Canada specific thing, but to be a very community driven event so that when we're doing it in a location, it's very localized. And we're already in conversations with 5 different locations right now of doing this in their areas, all varying stages of beginning to almost there. So we'll see what the next little bit looks like as we lock some of those in.
Is this are you seeing this being done through local churches, or is it more business groups or just networks of business people that know each other?
So ideally, in like an ideal world, it would be groups of business people that are already gathered together that understand sacred secular divide, they get this and they want to go to the next level. But the reality is, in a lot of parts of our nation, we don't have people at that level of understanding yet. So the church is a place where they're able to then gather those business people because they're already connected in. And it's also a beautiful thing for, I know I've talked to some business people that are very involved in their churches, and some, it's an incredible experience, and some, they've mentioned, oh, I feel like an ATM a bit. And so a way for a church to fully embrace their calling and to invest in their calling as a way to invite them in and to, we don't want to, in a sense of investing in business people, to forget about the church. I'm also, I'm a classic good old PK, so pastor's kid, it's in me. So we don't want to leave them in the dust as we're moving into more, what does it look like to integrate faith into business? And so bringing them along in the process and doing that really intentionally has meant a lot for what we're doing.
We'll be right back after a short break. If your business or ministry would like to sponsor the Business as Mission podcast, simply email info@thirdpathinitiative.com, and we'll set up a conversation about your needs and goals.
You know, it's interesting, Carrie. A few years ago, maybe a decade or so, I would have described the relationship between Business as Mission and the church, which really, it's all one thing, right? I mean, it's one body.
Yeah.
Yes, but if I had to describe the relationship, the Business as Mission folks felt like they were on the outside looking in. And then I noticed something. I spoke on this in 2019 before the pandemic hit at the BAM conference in the U.S. out in California, that it's reversed. We're the ones who are putting the wall up, and not inviting into what God is doing, in our world. And so, we in America, I don't know if you guys do this in Canada, but we call it the Treehouse Club. The cool kid part of the Treehouse Club, and if you're not, you're not. So they don't let the rope ladder down for you. And I've said many, many times, we cannot afford to do this to each other. The church, BAM, because most of the members are business people or they work in business. And our faith in the marketplace is vital, and BAM needs the church. If we go rogue and go independent of the church, we lose spiritual covering, I think, when we do that. So finding how to together is really, really special. So I thank you for saying that. That matters so much. All right. So what, gosh, there's so many things I could ask you. We could go all day. We won't. We'll do another one.
We definitely could.
So I want to jump into that question about the church. What are you seeing in the Canadian church? Is the church jumping into discipling business people, equipping business people to live out their faith in the workplace, or are they still more, how do you do it here in this building? I know everybody's on different places on that continuum, but what are you seeing happen? I pray a lot for the churches to wake up and embrace this resource that exists within them for much more than just money.
Yeah. It's definitely a mixed bag across our country and in different areas and spaces. And I think some groups, like some local communities and churches, really get it a lot more than others do. But I am also a diehard classic optimist. And so as much as I realistically, yes, we have a long way to go, but I'm very hopeful to see what it looks like. One specific thing I'm actually really excited about, I had the privilege of being a part of a group called OCC Our Common Calling. And so there's this really cool group that's meeting, having a conference actually in May, not a typical conference. It's more like a consultation conference that's happening, and it's bringing together the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada, Lausanne, Canada, bringing together 4Cs, which is Canadian Centre for Christian Charities, and CHEC, which is Christian Higher Education Canada as well. So kind of all of these different spheres of society coming together. And they're having an event in May that I'm really excited about. You know this, I'm actually pregnant. And so I was on the committee but it's like 2 weeks after my due date. So I had to shift some things around and pull someone else in to cover my spot. But I'm very excited to hear all of the great things about it. But it's going to be an incredible opportunity where they've actually allocated 25% for what they're calling Agora, 25% for agencies, 25% for assembly, and 25% for academia, and bringing together people to hear each other's voices and what that can look like in a very high level across our country, and doing that both in 2 locations. It's kind of some of it simulcast, some of it not, in both East and West Canada. So anyway, that's something that, for an example of something that I'm seeing in our nation, that gets me really excited about what it can look like for people to come together in a room, hear each other, and understand what is our common calling together. Obviously, there's a lot of trickle down that needs to happen from that into local communities. But even myself, my pastor, we have an incredible pastor that came and planted our church actually from New Zealand in Canada, and their family's going back, feeling a call to go and invest in their community back where they were. But our new pastor that's coming in, who's been a part of our community all along, he actually is a business person, and that has theological background as well, but has done business training for many years. So even on a personal note, I'm really excited to see how our community is going to continue to grow in that space. So I'm very, very hopeful for what our country has ahead.
Well, I am too, and I love to hear that because I think it's so vital. So first of all, you heard it here first. Congratulations, Carrie. Very exciting. So how do people learn about this conference? I love the concept. I even love the 4 A's, you know, or be Greek for the marketplace. And so thinking about, how can somebody learn about this conference? Because and when you say consultation rather than the traditional conference, there's not maybe clear on the difference. We're really talking about a conference is more being talked at, and a consultation is more talking together. And it's more conversational, much more collegial, trying to build bridges. And so, so how do they find out about this? You are does it go to bamcanada.ca? Is that the source of all information?
Actually, this one is, if you go to Our Common Calling, I don't actually remember the exact website right offhand in this moment, but if you just Google Our Common Calling Canada, I assume, add that in and you'll find it. But it's been an incredible effort of just an incredible team. It's led by some just different leaders all across one from each of the 4 A's, but then as well as some additional leaders that are doing great things. John Fuller has been doing a lot of really great stuff. I don't know if you know him, Mike, but if not, he's A+, definitely should meet.
We may have passed at some conference once upon a time, but no. So guys, is ourcommoncalling.ca. Very simple.
Beauty.
So check it out.
So you can find that there. And I think the nominations are currently open. So if you're Canadian and you know someone that might be a good fit, I think they're not open for much longer. I don't know exactly when they're closing. So go check it out. But it is definitely going to be there's no speaker, like a headliner going on. It's more really, we came together in prayer to figure out what is God saying to Canada and what is the main goal going to be. And really the passage of the Emmaus Road kept coming to everyone's mind of what does that journey look like. And really, we've been sitting in that for months, and it's been really cool to see how God keeps speaking different things of what the experience will be together. So it's going to be great.
And you can also, if you go to Lausanne Movement Canada, to their website, you can also, it's broadcast there as well. So very, very exciting. Very exciting. Mm-hmm. Wow. Wake up. Take a lesson from our northern system. You could use a few of these things happening here. So, all right. So, Carrie-Anne, you are such an optimist. What are you most hopeful about when you look at 2024 in BAM Canada and beyond? What are you most hopeful about?
Yeah, I think that the our launch of our missional business boot camps coming up this year is really gets me really, really excited to see just a really practical tool for people to be introduced to the concept of you can actually live a fully integrated life, and what does that look like, and what is God calling you to, and just really kind of gifting people with light bulb moments. I think is going to be fun. So really excited about that, and we'll take all the prayer. So if anyone listening, add it to your prayer list. We would covet your prayers for that. So really excited about those. Really excited to see what it looks like as more localized communities come out of those and are birthed, and just almost like Holy Spirit whisperings in those moments of what that could be. So really just excited about what that can be. Really excited as well. We've had some opportunities even through BAM Canada with what does it look like to help catalyze other communities globally as well? So even more prayer for that. We've been in conversations with, Aubrey was just in Zambia for a few weeks, being able to help invest in that community. We've been in conversations with a couple West African countries, helping try and bring them along on the BAM journey. And so just the influence we've been able to have has been honestly really fun. And I pinch myself all the time going, how do we get to do this? But I think, yeah, just what that can look like as we continue to say yes and step into what God is inviting us into. And then I would say across Canada, or more like generally, what I'm excited for within our culture and the intersection of BAM is really just excited for people to see BAM as not something that's strange or like this offshoot that's like random, but to see it as like, oh, wait, I have a business, so this is how I should be living, to kind of have it more, honestly, just more commonplace within conversations and spaces. So yeah, that's my hope and my aspirations and excitement for 2024.
Mine too. I was thinking back to the early days of the modern BAM movement, when it was primarily seen as a means to put Christian business people in unreached people group areas, restricted access country areas, which is exactly where you would have expected it to start, right? I mean, that's where God's. But what's happened over the last 30 years is that it's really sort of, what's the right word? It's backflowed, if you will, backflowed to the home countries, bringing the concept of integration, seamless integration, breaking down the sacred secular divide, and looking at, a holistic discipleship that includes your business. And I think that's been one of the unforeseen blessings that has come out of it. And what you just said is just mirrors that, let's matters as much. We used to think you had to cross an ocean to do BAM, right? And you never had to do that, but that's where it was birthed. But it's backwashing, backfilling, backflowing, whatever the right word is. And people are realizing I can live for Christ and for the kingdom and impact my community for the gospel wherever I am.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's got the seeds of another revival built into it. When business people, which are the majority of the members of our churches, wake up to the fact that what they do Monday through Friday, and for entrepreneurs, Monday through Monday, so 7 days a week.
Yeah, true.
It matters. It actually has positive impact on the kingdom.
Well, and even something you mentioned there a little bit earlier is the aspect of, we talk a lot about the language we use is, if it's not happening here, it's not going to happen there. So if people can't figure out how to fully integrate faith and life and business here, how can we expect somebody to even imagine doing it globally if that's what they're called to? But there's also a lot of, it's not binary. There's a lot of hybrids of, and I know we've talked about this even about like opening a new location or having a branch in another place to be able to have influence here and there even. It doesn't have to be an either or. So yeah, really excited to see as people use their imagination and let the Holy Spirit into their business with them to kind of co-imagine what that can be like.
It makes perfect sense when you think about one of the things emerging is the relationship between what it means to be an entrepreneur and what it means to be a creator. And that's what entrepreneurs do, right? They are living out the image of our creator God in their lives. And so being able to partner with God in your business, it's going to lead to a creative entry into what he's doing. I don't know what it looks like for anybody else. I've always told people, here's the question you need to ask. Lord, I'm yours. What will you have me do? Now, I don't want to be like Mike, or I want to be like Carrie-Anne. And of that you said that, because that's where I think we're all trying to come from. Mats and I had a conversation, I guess it was in California back in the 2019 timeframe. And I had made the comment that I didn't think Business as Mission was a movement. And he's challenged me, and he's right. Mats is always right when it comes to word choice. I was using it in the sense of a movement being organized by and led by men. He said, well, that's a program. And I said, you're right. You're absolutely right. This is a movement that is not organized or led by people. It is a movement. He's doing something, and he's inviting us to jump in. And that for everybody. So kudos to you, Mats. I know you listen to this, and you can give yourself a thumbs up. But you were right. It is definitely a movement, and it's a movement of God. So, Carrie-Anne, any last thing you want to say to us before I let you go this morning? I know your voice is, you've been a little under the weather, and I know your voice is, you're probably starting to itch a little bit in your throat. So I don't want to...
No worries. I would say the only thing is that don't do this alone. That's kind of one thing for BAM Canada that we're always... it's so fun when people go, I found my people. So if you're in Canada, awesome. We would love to meet you. But if you're not, find your people. Who are the people in your context or your community or your industry that you can find, and don't try to do it alone. It won't be fun, and you'll lose momentum pretty quick. So find your people and don't do it alone.
What great wisdom! Even Jesus sent out the disciples 2 by 2, and they walked with him. So total wisdom, and I support it. Carrie-Anne Ballantyne, thank you for being with us. She is are you co-director, executive director of BAM Canada? I'm not sure what your actual title is.
Yeah, we use co-founder.
She and Aubrey Tozer have founded BAM Canada. Look it up if you haven't seen it, bamcanada.ca. Get to know the organization, understand the purpose. The purpose is not to enroll people into this organization. It's to enroll people in what God's doing. And that's going to look different for different people, but to share our resources. So Carrie-Anne, thank you again. Great to see you. Glad you're feeling better. And you can't wait 2 years to come back. How about that?
Sounds good. Thanks again, Mike. Really appreciate it.
All right. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Business as Mission podcast. We invite you to become part of the story by supporting the BAM podcast at patreon.com/BAM Stories. There's a link in the notes with this episode. For more information, go to thirdpathinitiative.com or tryventure.com. Please share this podcast and give us a review wherever you listen. Third Path Initiative is your go-to site for accessible, affordable BAM training. Learn about the biblical foundations for business as mission, ethical capitalism, BAM strategies, and how to become a kingdom employee. It's all at thirdpathinitiative.com.